The evening sky was painted with hues of amber and rose, its colors seeping through the tall glass windows of the mansion. The house itself stood like a palace of dreams, its walls laced with gold patterns and its chandeliers gleaming like falling stars. Inside, the staff moved quietly, each step measured, each whisper hushed, for the master of the house demanded perfection in every corner of his estate. The garden was alive with fragrance, and the sound of scissors trimming the roses carried in the wind, mingling with the distant notes of a piano drifting from the music room. It was a scene of elegance, wealth, and serenity. But then, the serenity shattered. A piercing cry rang out, sudden and raw, slicing through the silence like a bell of alarm. It came from the heart of the mansion, where the polished marble floor reflected the fading sunlight. "Papa, my hand hurts. It hurts so much." The words quivered out of a small voice, breaking under the weight of tears. In the grand hallway, standing beside the foot of the staircase, was a little girl no older than 6. Her golden curls bounced against her flushed cheeks as she sobbed uncontrollably, her small fingers clenched around her hand. Her blue silk dress, embroidered with tiny pearls, was now wrinkled as she doubled over, clutching herself. She looked so fragile, so lost, her tears spilling onto the expensive fabric as if diamonds had turned liquid and fallen from her eyes. The maids gasped in unison, rushing to her side, their footsteps echoing against the marble. One of them, Maria, the nanny who had cared for her since birth, bent down to her level, voice trembling with worry. "Miss Emily, what happened? Show me, darling." But Emily only wailed louder, lifting her trembling hand. Her palm was red and swollen, and a thin line of blood traced down her delicate skin where she had accidentally cut herself on a shard of broken glass hidden near the staircase. "Oh, heavens!" another servant cried, pressing her hands to her mouth. The staff began whispering, some darting toward the kitchen to fetch a cloth, others frozen in place, unsure what to do. The atmosphere of the mansion, usually calm and dignified, was suddenly trembling with fear, not only for the child, but for how the master would respond when he discovered what had happened. Emily's cries grew heavier, her chest rising and falling as she sobbed for her father. "It hurts, Papa. Papa, where are you?" she cried again, her words echoing through the tall halls. Her small voice was full of desperation, a sound that carried beyond pain, a call for comfort, for safety, for the one person who could make everything right. Maria pulled out her handkerchief, dabbing gently at the blood, but Emily flinched and pulled away, the pain too sharp. "Shh, sweetheart, it's all right. Just a little cut," Maria whispered, though her own heart thudded with panic. The other maids stood close, torn between helping and keeping their distance, because they knew how fiercely protective Mr. Grant was of his only child. Any harm to her, however small, was enough to stir storms. The room seemed to hold its breath. The ticking of the ornate grandfather clock grew louder, stretching each second into eternity. Emily's sobs filled every corner of the mansion, wrapping around the chandeliers, the staircase, the velvet curtains. The world outside, the trimmed roses, the shining cars waiting in the driveway, the city bustling beyond the iron gates, all seemed to fade. What mattered now was the pain of one small child in a palace of riches, a pain that made her entire universe collapse into tears. Her hand trembled as she held it up again, her face crumpling in sorrow. "Papa," she whispered this time, softer, almost as if she were praying. The innocence in her plea was powerful, tugging at the hearts of everyone who heard it. For all the wealth that surrounded her, for all the marble and gold and silk, none of it mattered to her now. She wanted only the warmth of her father's embrace, the reassurance of his voice, the comfort that no money in the world could buy. And though he had not yet appeared, though his footsteps had not yet echoed in the hall, a shift could already be felt. The moment her cry reached his ears, nothing in that mansion, no business meeting, no phone call, no responsibility, would matter more than the tiny, wounded hand of his daughter. The sound of heavy footsteps broke the tension in the room, steady, deliberate, echoing across the marble floor like the rhythm of a drum. Every servant stiffened, their eyes flickering toward the tall archway at the end of the hall. They knew that sound well. It belonged to the master of the house, Alexander Grant, a man whose presence commanded respect in boardrooms and fear in his mansion. The whisper of his arrival silenced the servants instantly, their words cut short, their movements halting as though the air itself had grown heavier. And then he appeared. Dressed in a deep charcoal suit tailored perfectly to his tall frame, Alexander Grant stepped into the hall with an aura that seemed to draw all light toward him. His tie was still neatly knotted, his shoes polished to a flawless shine, and his expression carried the sternness of a man accustomed to control. He had just returned from a business meeting, the kind where billions of dollars were shifted with a single decision, and yet the sight that greeted him now made his briefcase slip from his hand and land with a dull thud on the floor. There, in the center of the vast room, was his daughter, Emily, his world. His entire being shrank down to the sight of her tiny figure bent over, her little hand clutched tightly against her chest as tears streamed down her cheeks. For a moment, his powerful frame faltered. His jaw tightened, his sharp eyes, usually cold and calculating, softened with an emotion rarely seen by anyone outside these walls. His heart clenched so fiercely it felt as though time itself had slowed. "Emily," he breathed, and his voice was not the commanding tone that could silence a boardroom, but the trembling whisper of a father terrified. He strode forward, his long legs covering the marble floor in seconds, and dropped to his knees beside her, ignoring the stares of the staff who had never seen him like this. "My precious girl, what happened?" His voice cracked as he reached for her hand, his large, steady fingers trembling as they hovered above her small palm. The sight of blood on her soft skin cut him deeper than any loss he had ever endured in business. Carefully, as though she were made of glass, he cradled her hand in his. "It hurts, Papa," she whimpered, her face streaked with tears. "It hurts so much." "Oh, sweetheart," he murmured, his forehead lowering to press. A gentle kiss against her hair. His powerful shoulders slumped, and for the first time the mighty Alexander Grant seemed smaller, fragile even, as he held his daughter's wounded hand as though it were the most precious jewel in the world. Around them, the servants stood, frozen. They had seen their master furious, triumphant, commanding, but never broken. And in that moment they realized there was only one force in the world capable of bending him: the tears of his little girl. Maria, still kneeling nearby, tried to explain. "Sir, she must have touched a broken shard of glass by the staircase. I didn't—" But Alexander silenced her with a glance, not of anger but of urgency. His focus was entirely on Emily. "No excuses. Just bring me what she needs. Now." His tone was clipped, commanding, and the staff scattered instantly, hurrying to fetch warm water, clean cloths, and the doctor. Yet as his hand returned to Emily's, his voice softened again. Like two different men lived within him, the master of empires and the father of one little girl. "Shh, darling. Papa's here," he soothed, rocking her gently against his chest. Emily's sobs quieted, though her little face remained scrunched in pain. Her small fingers wrapped around his thumb, holding it tightly as though it were the only anchor keeping her steady. And Alexander let her, sitting cross-legged on the polished floor, caring nothing for appearances, for reputation, or for the eyes that might be watching. For years he had been called ruthless, untouchable, unshakable. He was the man who turned failing businesses into golden empires, who could stand before judges, rivals, and ministers without a flicker of fear. But here, holding his child, he was none of those things. He was just a father whose world could be undone by a single cry. "Everything will be all right, Emily," he whispered, stroking her hair with a tenderness that only she had ever unlocked. "Papa won't let anything hurt you again. I promise." Her breathing slowed, her sobs softening into small hiccups as she leaned into his chest. The pain hadn't fully gone, but the warmth of his arms, the steady beat of his heart, was enough to calm her trembling. And as the golden light of the evening filtered across the hall, Alexander Grant held his daughter close, his heart silently swearing that no wealth, no power, no empire could ever matter more than this small, fragile hand in his. The doctor arrived swiftly, his leather bag swinging at his side as the staff hurried him into the great hall. By then, Alexander Grant was still on the marble floor with Emily in his arms, refusing to move until he knew she was safe. His powerful frame bent low, shielding her as though the vast mansion could not protect her enough without his embrace. The doctor knelt, gently examining Emily's hand, his practiced eyes scanning the small cut. "It is not serious," the doctor assured softly, looking up at the anxious father. "A minor wound. Painful, yes, but it will heal quickly. She is strong." Alexander's shoulders sank with relief, though his arms never loosened around Emily. He watched every motion as the doctor cleaned the wound with warm water, applied a soothing ointment, and wrapped her tiny hand in soft white bandages. Emily winced once, a small whimper escaping, and instantly her father pressed his lips to her forehead, whispering, "It's all right, my love. Papa's here." His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away the last traces of tears. When the bandage was tied neatly, Emily stared at her hand with wide, damp eyes. For a moment she seemed to forget her pain as she looked up at her father. "Will it go away soon, Papa?" she asked in a small voice. "Yes, my princess," Alexander answered, pulling her closer. "The hurt will go away, but Papa will stay." "Always." The doctor packed his bag, bowing respectfully, but Alexander hardly noticed. His world had narrowed to the child in his arms. Around him, the grand mansion, the golden chandeliers, the towering paintings, the staff waiting silently, faded into the background. For all his wealth and power, nothing in his life mattered more than this fragile moment, where his daughter's safety outweighed the empires he had built. The servants lingered near the edges of the hall, their eyes lowered, but their hearts stirred. They had served Mr. Grant for years, obeyed his commands without question, but rarely had they seen this side of him. To witness the man who moved fortunes with a signature now cradling his child with trembling hands was a sight they would carry with them forever. It softened the house, filling it not with fear or duty, but with something far more powerful: love. Alexander rose at last, still holding Emily against his chest. He carried her into the drawing room, its velvet curtains drawn back to welcome. The last light of dusk. The fire crackled gently in the grand fireplace, and he settled into an armchair, keeping Emily nestled in his lap as though she were made of spun glass. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart, her small body finally relaxing after all the tears. "You scared me, Emily," he murmured, his chin resting lightly on her hair. "Do you know that?" She blinked, up at him, her lashes wet. "I didn't mean to, Papa. I only wanted to play." "I know, my love. You are only a child," he said softly, brushing her curls back with his fingers. "But listen to me, Emily. If I could, I would give away everything I own, the houses, the cars, the companies, all of it, just to keep you safe. Do you understand? Nothing matters to me more than you." Her lips curved into a faint smile, her innocence shining through. "Not even your big office with the tall windows?" she asked, her voice trembling between curiosity and mischief. "Not even that," Alexander said, chuckling despite himself. "Not even the tallest building in the city. None of it means a thing without you in my world." She giggled then, a soft sound that melted away the last remnants of fear. Her bandaged hand lifted, small and tender, and she pressed it against his cheek. "I love you, Papa." His throat tightened. The man who negotiated with kings, who could stare down rivals without blinking, felt his eyes sting as he kissed her palm. "And I love you more than anything, Emily. More than all the stars in the sky." The room grew warm with the gentle glow of the fire, the silence broken only by her quiet laughter and the sound of her father's steady voice. The staff, knowing their presence was no longer needed, slipped away quietly, leaving the pair alone. The mansion, usually so filled with the hum of business calls, the shuffle of hurried steps, and the clatter of wealth, was instead wrapped in a peace it had not known for years. As the night settled over the city beyond the iron gates, the world of Alexander Grant shrank into something simple, pure, and infinitely more valuable than riches. A father and his daughter, safe in each other's arms, sharing love that no empire could buy. And in that stillness, with the crackle of the fire and the steady beat of his heart, Alexander knew this was the only fortune he truly cared to protect.